Thursday night football game day with the Hall of Fame.
What is going on, fantasy football owners out there and YouTube Nation? We are live. It is 6 o'clock on the East Coast, as always. And it is Chris Fierce here with you for the week number 7 your way, 7 my way, preview edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report. This is for your team, your league, your game, your home. You know where to go for your fantasy advice on a weekly basis. Well, I can say this to start off about my team. We are riding the ship around. After our 0-2 start, we have won 3 of the last 4. We are now sitting at 3-3, and we are making that push now for the postseason. So we've made some big moves over these last couple weeks when players haven't produced, when there have been, of course, injury concerns, players that are better options out there on the waiver wire that we can have an easier schedule going forward. You have to really dissect all of these things as a fantasy owner when you're looking ahead. That's kind of the thing. And when you're looking at it, you want to view things also in the short term, but you also want to view things in the long term, depending on where your record's at. Whether you're 6-0, 5-1, at least 500 or above, making that playoff push, you want to make moves that not only are good for you in the short term, but also in the long term. If you're kind of below that 500 point, you want to really get the big players now. So then maybe if the big wins start piling up and other players or other teams below you fall because maybe bye weeks, then that can help you further as the season goes along. So doesn't matter, again, as I always say, it doesn't matter where you're at. You just got to be aware of everything that's going on out there. Case in point, and a great example to start off this show. News is always constantly changing when it comes to player injuries and things of that nature. And there was plenty of it today before the show. There was plenty of it leading up to the show. A lot of players either being limited in practices today, being completely even ruled out. The timetable of certain players changing, like Ben Roethlisberger, for example, of the Steelers, who originally they thought it'd be a 2 to 3 week time frame due to his torn meniscus. Now the owners come out and said, no, that's realistic. That's maybe best case scenario, but 2 to 6 weeks is more realistic. Carlos Hyde of the 49ers is out this week due to injury at running back. And then there was another. I'm going to tell you about. Plus, we can't forget about the bye weeks. We can't forget about the bye weeks this week because, again, Dallas and Carolina this week, even though one team is very good and the other team is very, very bad, are on bye weeks this week. But that means some key notable names you won't have in your fantasy lineups this week. You're not going to have Dak Prescott if you used him at quarterback, or Cam Newton. You're not going to have Ezekiel Elliott running back this week, or Jonathan Stewart now that he's back healthy. And you're not going to have wide receivers like Kelvin Benjamin or Cole Beasley, who's broken out for Dallas as a nice fill-in since Des Bryant got hurt. And you're not going to have the tight ends, Jason Witten or Greg Olsen. So some really notable names missing this week. But another big notable name that just happened probably about a good half hour to hour ago before the show started. LaShawn McCoy, the Buffalo running back, actually suffered a hamstring injury in practice yesterday. We all know how good he's been for the Bills this season. He's absolutely insane. The Bills have the top rushing offense in the NFL, and they have third most touchdowns, something like that, or third most touchdowns, something to that extent. They've been very, very good this season, and McCoy's put up double-digit points 5 out of the first 6 weeks of the season. But then he suffers this hamstring injury in practice, and he has dealt with numerous hamstring injuries or an injury of some scope over his career. So maybe in a way this was inevitable to happen to LaShawn McCoy. ESPN's Josina Anderson today reported that McCoy will definitely be out this week and could potentially miss multiple weeks ahead. So what does that mean? Well, that means next man up. That means the next guy to get in Buffalo is Mike Gillislee, who I think immediately becomes at least a low-end RB1 this week, definitely high-end RB2 at the worst, because Buffalo also is one of the better offensive lines in all of football, hence their propensity to get a lot of rushing yards. But here's what makes it – here's why it's good from my perspective. my opponent this week, in the span of a few days, has lost Roethlisberger to injury, lost Eddie Royal of the Bears to injury. He won't play in tonight's game with a toe issue. Deshaun Jackson's questionable at wide receiver with a shoulder issue, and now he just lost LaShawn McCoy. So he has been scrambling over these past few minutes, making numerous moves to compensate for that. I think he picked up Eli Manning off waivers, but he's not going to play him. He's going to play Kirk Cousins over him to pair with Deshaun Jackson, which I guess makes sense if Jackson's active. I think he picked up another wide receiver. I think he picked up like a backup tight end. But he did not address his sudden loss of LaShawn McCoy. And guess who just happened to be available on waivers? Mike Gillislee. I wonder if I'm the owner facing the owner who just lost LaShawn McCoy, I better make sure he doesn't get Mike Gillislee. And oh, by the way, I better make sure he doesn't get Mike Gillislee, but I make sure I put Mike Gillislee in my starting lineup and start him against him. Hashtag sniper strategy. This, and I know that, you know, other fantasy people might think, oh, that should be illegal. Oh, that's so rude. That's so mean. But fantasy football is a game, it is an ever-changing game. You always have to be on top of everything. In order to succeed in this game, you have to be on top of stuff. And if you fall asleep at the wheel for even one little second or minute or moment or day, stuff like that could happen to your roster. And an owner like me could jump on board and take advantage of that and just snipe you, literally. Like you know, Weird Al Yankovic says in that song eBay, I am the type who is liable to snipe you. Well, yeah, this is it. My opponent just got sniped by me because you didn't realize that LaShawn McCoy was out, and now I have the guy that's going to replace him. He. You have to be aware. You have to be aware. Let's see. The doy. So anyway, that's why I had to talk about that, because you got to have your eyes open, people. Oh, I missed. But anyway, speaking of having your eyes open, but you got to be aware. You got to be aware of the injury situations, and you got to be aware of who you have and what's out there on the wire, and always be aware. Otherwise, you're liable to get sniped. So you just got to keep that in mind. You know, when you're getting ready, when you're prepping for your fantasy week every single week, when you're prepping for that, you got to look at, you know, who, you know, your projections. And I know you don't want to buy too much into the projections. I mean, we project here, but you don't want to buy too much into it. But you don't want to take a little bit of, you know, maybe not fully into it. Some people do, some people don't. It depends on what type of player you are. But you know, you want to kind of look at that, see how your players are rated, the matchups that they have, the matchups compared to your opponent's players. There's a lot, and the injuries, and who's out there on waivers. You have to all take this into account when you're prepping for your fantasy matchup each week. Also, you have to take into account the London games. There's another London game this week at 9:30 in the morning on Sunday. So make sure, again, that your lineup is locked before that game starts, because it will lock if you're not. You don't have it set and you're like, oh, I got to take this. I got to put my player in that Giants-Rams game in there, takes one out. If you don't do that before 9:30, it's too late. So make sure that you have the players in your lineup that you want at the end of the day, that you think are going to put the best results for you. And that's what we're going to try to do, again, like we do on here every single week. We're going to try to get you ready for this week the best way that we can with the information that we have and what's in front of us. I always, the day before I record this show, I always check RotoWorld. It is I think a very knowledgeable fantasy news site, and I always look at the player news and see the wire and see what's trending in the news stories, and then I always update my kind of lists on who to play, who to not play. So that way I can share what latest information I have with you guys, so that way you know for sure what's going on. So, and then I kind of look at the players that are out there and their matchups and just kind of go on that. to kind of put out what I see in the matchup. So with that being said, so no Dallas players, no Carolina players this week. So again, make sure if you have any of those players, you have them on your bench because they're on a bye this week. But there are a lot of really good names, I think, to use this week as bye week fillers, and I'll talk about some of those in the matchups as well. So we'll go ahead and dive right into tonight's matchup tonight, the Thursday night football game. It is Bears at Packers tonight, and these are two NFC North teams that just don't like each other. This is one of the longest, I believe it is the longest running rivalry in the NFL, or certainly one of the longest. Bears right now sitting at 1-5, still a lot of question marks with them. But the thing I've been impressed with again with Chicago, and I've said it on the show the past couple of weeks, is the job that Brian Hoyer has done leading this offense, the job that Jordan Howard has done at running back. The receiver situation there, Cameron Meredith evolving as a reliable target for Brian Hoyer. So there's still a lot of talent here with the Chicago team. But again, the problem has been, though, their defense has been very forgiving, and they're just not finding ways to finish games when they're in games. So, kind of like the Colts in a way. So it's just been very tricky. And then the Packers also have their own issues. And again, it's kind of like the one year when the Packers were struggling early in the season, and Aaron Rodgers told Packers fans to relax. He told them to relax. And that in the end, that worked out, okay. But right now, this team does not look like the elite studs you see on a week-to-week basis, and the running game now is decimated for Green Bay. That's the big story going into tonight's game. The Packers running back situation. Eddie Lacy today got placed on injured reserve, an ankle issue, so that will require surgery. So that's going to be a big concern going forward as well, and so you're not going to have him now. And there's really no time till if there even is going to be a return. That's up for debate at this point. But you can't really hold on to Eddie Lacy at this point. So unless he's an undroppable player in your league, but I think at this point, considering he's on IR, he should be. So you want to drop Eddie Lacy if you can. James Starks is still going to be out 3 to 4 weeks with a knee issue of his own. So that means that the Packers have had to literally either utilize the wide receiver at the running back position, like Ty Montgomery, or potentially we've heard Randall Cobb could also be used tonight as a running back as well. But they've literally had to acquire a back in a trade and sign a back off the practice squad. And the report tonight is that Don Jackson, who they just signed off the practice squad, will be the main back for the Packers tonight. Now, notice they didn't say – notice the verbiage they used there. They didn't use starting running back. They said main back. I find that wording very interesting because that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get all the carries. Niall Davis, certainly the back they acquired from the Kansas City Chiefs in the trade, I think that they will certainly use him maybe on passing down situations, which is kind of more of his style anyway. Niall Davis has never been a running back that's going to get like the bulk of the carries, like handle a full workload of carries. He's more of a traditional third down passing back anyway. So I think he'll be utilized on those situations. And Jackson's going to get, a lot of the work. But then it's interesting to see if they do utilize, because they actually did use Montgomery in practice this week as a running back, so for a couple series. So I find that really interesting. And Montgomery also got more involved in the offense last week because Devontae Adams is still out as the number 3 wide receiver behind Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. So then Montgomery steps in and has a nice week against Dallas, catching 6 passes for 98 yards. So I picked up Montgomery off waivers myself. I dropped Beasley for Montgomery because Beasley had a bye this week. So again, I'm thinking short term here. But I also think Montgomery, if Adams is out for an extended period of time, could be, and especially with the running back situation, could still be a long-term asset. So I'm thinking both sides of the debate here. So I think he's a very interesting play this week, and we'll see what happens either way. So your obvious starts tonight for the Packers. I think Aaron Rodgers is still good to sit. I don't think you sit him. You start Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. I think really those are really the only big names you can start out of the Packer group. For the Bears, Jordan Howard at running back, Alshon Jeffrey, finally healthy at wide receiver. You can keep rolling with him. And I'll say Zach Miller at tight end if he plays. He is questionable with the rib issue that has kind of been bothering him for most of this season, but he's played through it the past couple weeks and actually looked really good. He's gotten a lot of targets from Brian Hoyer. So I think certainly he has tight end one value this week. So if Zach Miller does play, I think you have to put him out there as a nice tight end one option. I mentioned Ty Montgomery. Again, I think you start him this week, especially with that dual threat value. I think, I have him rated as kind of a low-end wide receiver too. Maybe, a 3 at worst, but I'm going to use him as my 3 this week behind Beckham and Fitzgerald. I think, there's definitely an opportunity there to really break out and have a good fantasy day. So if Ty Montgomery is still available in your league and you're hurting at wide receiver, if you could drop somebody on your bench you don't use very often, and you can pick up Ty Montgomery and plug him in there, I do it because I think he's going to really benefit from his use in this offense. And I mentioned Cameron Meredith, and I think you can keep going with him. Again, Eddie Royal is inactive for this game with that toe issue, so no Eddie Royal tonight. So if you're a smart owner, get him out of your lineup. Finally, that guy playing did. But Brian Hoyer clearly has developed this nice rapport with Cameron Meredith, and he his targets and his work keeps going up every single week. So at least for me, nice low-end wide receiver 2 value. Again, 3 at worst for Cameron Meredith. I think a very nice play tonight. My sits. I don't think you can trust Brian Hoyer in this matchup. I think, it's very tricky. You're going on the road at Lambeau, primetime game. I'm really worried about Brian Hoyer, and he's done a nice job with the offense, don't get me wrong. Like I said, a big upgrade from Cutler. But, it's just, to me, very, very risky. Very risky QB3 in my book. Maybe in 2 quarterback leagues, a what-the-heck option as a second option just to see what happens. But very, very risky play in my book. And I mentioned the Packer running backs. If you're going to play one, you play Jackson if you're really hurting at running back. I don't think he's going to be a great play in this game because, again, it just signed him off the practice squad. But, I really wouldn't throw him in the lineups yet until we see actual action from him, So maybe, again, it was a what-the-heck RB3 option. Niall Davis, again, kind of same thing, RB3 or flex to see what his role is in that passing game. But I really wouldn't recommend either back as a great fantasy play. But if you play one, I think you probably play Jackson because he's going to get the most of the touches is what it's looking like from what we have seen. Either way, Bears-Packers always seems to be a fun game regardless. It might be, a shootout. It might be it's probably going to be a close game. I don't expect a blowout. I actually expect a tight, close game. It usually always is. So I expect a good one tonight. All right, so going into the Sunday games now. Again, we start with the early game in London, the 9:30 a.m. game between the Giants and the Rams. And these are kind of 2 teams really that over the past couple weeks have kind of gone in different directions. I mean, the Giants started off really, really slow, and yet the past couple weeks have actually looked like functional offensive Giants again, at least in terms of the passing game with Eli Manning and Odell Beckham. What a week that Beck's had last week. And even though Beck's antics, I got to admit, are a little bit crazy, the whole kicking net thing, I think that's going to take on a whole new for gosh sakes now, the kicking net is his wife. He proposed to it last week, and she said yes. So, I mean, that's been a little crazy. The reality is that when Bex is good, he is good. I mean, that's just the whole point of it. He's only had 1 real dud game this season, but that was against Minnesota, who, oh, by the way, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I forget, but I think Minnesota's defense is pretty good. Just saying, they're 5-0. They're 5-0 for a reason. They're really, really good. That secondary, Xavier Rhodes, I think he's pretty good. Yeah, so they're really good. So I ignore that. I'm not worried. But his other points, 7, 8, 11, 12, and then the 32-point breakout last week, and while playing through a hip pointer, which certainly is not it's not exactly a painless injury. It does hurt. But he broke out in that second half and had over 222 yards and the 2 touchdowns for an awesome fantasy day. So a huge week there. Now, he has been, of course, now the only question with Beckham, and I'm concerned at this too because my team's a Beckham owner, or I have a Beckham on my team, I should say. Bex has been limited in practice the last 2 days because of the hip issue. But I think what they're really doing with Bex is they're just going to give him treatment. They don't want to have to suffer a setback in practice like what happened to, say, like Doug Martin in Tampa Bay, or I think with Foster in Miami a couple times, or with McCoy in practice yesterday. They don't want to have him suffer that setback, so they're just kind of giving him, limited work on the side or whatever, to make sure he doesn't have a setback. So, and that's a safe way to go. So that means that Bex is probably still going to be in line to play this week. So I think as long as he plays and he's active, you play him as normal. You keep him in your lineup as well. So the obvious guys is Beckham as long as he's active, and of course Todd Gurley for the Rams. Those really are the only two obvious names to play in this matchup. There isn't really a whole lot of big time, fantasy names in this matchup, but those two guys, they're no-brainers every single week. But I think you can start Eli Manning. It looks like he's, back in that really good rhythm. And think about the matchup here with the Rams. The Rams just gave up a lot to Matthew Stafford and the Lions. And the Rams actually had probably one of their best games of the season and a loss. And the Rams, again, the Rams were 3-1 at the start of the year. I said on here, I didn't know how. I don't know how. Can someone explain it? I don't know how. And now here we are 2 weeks later, and oh, by the way, they've lost 2 straight. So, we were all fooled. We were all fooled. We drank the blue Gatorade. We drank Ram Gatorade and thought, oh, this is pretty good stuff. And that's pretty good right there. 3-1 start. That's pretty good. And now all of a sudden, the last 2 weeks come along, and and we drink it and do that. Oh, I spit a little bit wrong direction. I hope that didn't destroy my remotes. Oh, I should have moved those out of the way before doing that. But sometimes you need a visual metaphor. Oh, now it's all Gatorade liquefied over here. But you know what I'm coming from. We bought into the Rams at first, and now all of a sudden, they might be junk again. So, and even though Case Keenum played, I got to admit, a very nice game and a loss. They lost to Detroit in the end, but oh, I think that got a little too messy than I thought. Holy cow. That was a lot messier than I thought. Oh, I'll do a little bit of cleaning. Okay, note to self: never do that again. Maybe in the future use water. I don't know. Use water. Okay. Note to self. Oh man, I even got it up here. What the heck, man? I didn't know my spit had that much velocity. I guess I don't know my own strength. I mean, it's like up here. This is like I really projected this thing. I think some droplets even got all the way over here behind the laptop, people. Over here. Some droplets got over here. What the heck? Oh my gosh. Holy cow. Like mega droplets. I apologize for that. I did not expect that result in a way, but that just happened. But you get, I guess now that might have showed it enough, but you get the picture for the most part. Maybe the Rams aren't who we thought they were. Dennis Green. So, but Eli Manning, I think high upside QB2 in this good matchup. I think in the end, is a very decent play this week. I'm finding like little droplets everywhere. This is like cray cray. I'm finding little droplets everywhere I look. I think the floor got the worst of it, and that's really not all that bad. But I mean, I was like projecting it. I was trying to go this way, and it went like fountain that way, and it landed just. Okay, bad. At the end of the day, bad idea. But that will be a moment we look back on at the end of the year. Speaking of shocking moments, you know what? I never thought I would say this on this show, but I think the time has finally come to start a Rams wide receiver. Oh, it's finally happened. Someone has found the chair. Someone has found the spot as the Rams' #1 wide receiver. Maybe? And it could be. I don't want to get too bought into it, but here's the thing. Here's the thing about Kenny Britt. He has certainly got a lot more targets lately than a Brian Quick or even Tavon Austin. He's kind of made them a little bit forgettable. So for me, coming off that big week, I think Kenny Britt certainly has entered into the discussion of at least high-end wide receiver 3 value. Again, if you're hurting a wide receiver and you need, again, a playmaker, maybe Kenny Britt could be your guy this week. For the sits, I still say Case Keenum is a sit. Look, I know he had probably one of the best games of his career last week, but here's the thing. He was playing #1, he was playing the Lions, and the Lions defense is nothing special. Games like the one he had, that's not going to happen every single week. He's just really not consistent enough to have startable fantasy value. While the Giants defense, is also really nothing special. They've been known to give up a lot this year. I wouldn't get cute. I wouldn't try to put him in your lineup. So don't be high on him this week. Giants running backs continue to disappoint, even though Rashad Jennings is back healthy. Again, I've said it. He never gets better. He never improves. He's not. Giants running backs are worthless in fantasy. This is a passing offense. They're not playing. So speaking of not getting cute and putting out plenty of nothing, don't trust a Giants running back this week. And Sterling Shepard, wide receiver, the rookie, he's just very target and touchdown dependent, and is nothing really more than a risky wide receiver 3. And Victor Cruz really at this point should not be even owned. So he's just not getting enough work. Bex right now really is the only, I think, full-time Giants receiver that you can trust. Moving on next to Saints at Chiefs. Battle here. Saints are 2-3. Chiefs are looking at 3-2. The Chiefs want to contend with the Raiders and the Broncos for first in the AFC West, so it's obviously a big game for them. And the thing about the Saints is, what kind of Saints team are we going to get? The bugaboo always has been for them. Saints play better at home, worse on the road. So what kind of team? So if we go by that history, then this week it's not really going to be a good week for Saints fantasy players. So plus, not only that, but you're going up against a Chiefs defense that has been very strong, traditionally is very strong, and Andy Reid really knows, he knows Sean Payton quite well from his days coaching in Philadelphia. So I think this is really not a tailor-made matchup for the Saints players as much. But for the Chiefs, I think, a lot of Chiefs players I think you can use in this matchup, maybe with the exception of Jamal Charles, because here's the thing. We keep thinking that at some point the shackles are going to be released. LOL, Donald Trump joke. No. I mean, at some point we think they're going to come off of Jamal Charles and the Chiefs are finally going to let him run wild and run loose. But it looks like, again, they're still slowly easing him back into action. I can sort of understand that again. The guy's had 2 ACL injuries over the past few years. So I can sort of understand where the Chiefs are coming from here in that regard. So right now it looks to be like Spencer Ware is still the guy. And now that they've let Mal Davis go and Charkandrick West is still banged up, it's just going to be these two in the backfield at the moment. So I really like a lot of the Chiefs players this week, but Jamal Charles, I'm still really worried about unless we really see that workload start to increase this week. It's going to smell like blue cherry over here now for the rest of the show. the pungent smell is in the air now. Again, I don't know why I wanted to do that, why it came to my mind, but bad idea. So your obvious plays in this game, I mentioned Spencer Ware. I think as long as he has that top role in the Chiefs backfield, you keep rolling him out there. Jeremy Maclin, still the Chiefs, the Saints defense we know sucks. We know that. The Saints defense is terrible, especially in the passing game. So Jeremy Maclin is probably destined to have a big week this week. So you keep going with him. And I'm going to say even Travis Kelce. I think Travis Kelce will find the end zone at least once this week. I know it's been a tough year for you Kelce owners. I mean, for tight end in general this year, maybe outside of New England with Gronk and Martellus Bennett and Greg Olsen, and maybe even Delaney Walker, outside of maybe those four, it's been a pretty depressing year when it comes to tight ends. It really hasn't been outside of those top four guys. Everyone else has just been kind of, either or disgusting. Like my this blue tongue. Absolutely gross. Absolutely disgusting. But so it's tough. But I think Travis Kelce, I think we'll find the end zone at least once this week. Again, like I said, it's been tough. It's been tough on these tight ends, but I think he's going to bounce back in a big way this week. For the Saints, the only two guys really I can trust are Brandon Cooks, but for me, more of a low-end one, outside of his normal Elite 1 status, I think more of a low-end wide receiver 1 this week. And I still think Mark Ingram is an okay play. And I know, again, it's been tough for Mark Ingram owners too because of the dreaded touchdown vultures when it happened a couple weeks ago when John Kuhn scored 3 touchdowns at the goal line. And then last week, for gosh sakes, Kobe Fleener, the tight end, rushes in a 1-yard touchdown and steals it from Mark Ingram. I know Mark Ingram owners has been tough. I know that. But keep having faith. Don't give up on him. Still gets a lot of work in that offense. Still gets a ton of work. So I think he's still going to have enough of a decent fantasy day to at least warrant RB2 value for you. So I think you can still play Mark Ingram. And I mentioned Alex Smith, and I mentioned the Chiefs offense. So Alex Smith at quarterback is a great fantasy play this week. I think he's a great, certainly, again, if you don't have Cam Newton or you don't have Dak Prescott, or you play in a 2-quarterback league and you need help, I think Alex Smith makes for a great fantasy play. It would not surprise me if Alex Smith reaches at least 15 fantasy points this week, if not more. I'd say 20 is his ceiling, but certainly if he surpasses that, it would not surprise me. And I think he certainly has low-end QB1 upside as a result of that. As for the sits, again, this is a major bust alert, Drew Brees. I mean, and again, it's because of the fact that historically the Saints have played worse on the road than at home. And it worries me, and unless you have better options, really, you probably can't afford to sit Drew Brees. I understand that. But you're not going to get that elite QB1 production, I don't think. The Chiefs secondary, again, as we've seen, is very strong. The defense is strong. They're going to get pressure, I think, on him a little bit. So for me, he's more like a QB2 this week. Again, you might still be forced to play him, but not a recommended strong starting option this week. Again, I mentioned Jamal Charles. Nothing but a risky RB2 until we see his full workload come back. And then the Saints receivers, outside of Brandon Cooks, are Willie Snead and Michael Thomas. Now, the nice thing about Michael Thomas, and I would know this because I have Michael Thomas on my fantasy team. He's on my bench, but he's done actually pretty good things for nice depth over the course of the season. Michael Thomas now has a touchdown in 3 straight games, so that's huge. That just goes to show how much the Saints spread the ball around and get all their receivers involved, which is nice. But, but again, Saints on the road, I worry. It's just I don't like the fact that they're probably going to get targets, but are they going to make something out of those targets? That's going to be the big issue here. So for me, Thomas more of a flyer wide receiver 3 at best. If you have to play him, go for it. But I don't expect top production. That touchdown streak might end this week. In fact, it probably will. But I wouldn't expect that this week. Snead, more of a risky wide receiver 3 or 4. Plus, he's just come back from injury himself. So where is he at going forward? So both really, really risky plays for me this week. And again, I mentioned Kobe Fleener because, don't get cute with Kobe Fleener. I mean, yes, he's been getting targeted more, but he hasn't done much of anything with those targets, if at all. Oh my gosh, he had a rushing touchdown last week. That's not going to happen every single week, I guarantee it. So I don't see how an owner can even have Kobe Fleener at this point. He just has not panned out to be the stud that we all thought he was going to be. Guilty. So I'm gonna kick myself for that all freaking year. So what more can you say? But just not an option this week. Colts at Titans. This is a huge battle in the AFC South, especially now with the fact that the Colts. Painful to talk about. I mean, coming from a Colts fan, it is painful. Watching that game last week, seeing that the Colts were up 23-9 with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, I'm thinking this game is over. This game is, they dominate all night long. Outside of Lamar Miller, the Texans have done nothing. And then all of a sudden, Miller goes buku on that 50-yard maneuvering up and down the field on a slant for the touchdown. And then they find Fedorowicz late in the end zone for a touchdown. And it's like, what the blank just happened? All of a sudden, we're going to overtime. And then Houston gets it and they score. And then bleh. So it was just so unfortunate. So now the Texans have a 2-game lead in the division, at least over the Colts. Tennessee is a game back, and Jacksonville is just a game and a half back because this division is buku crazy, as either really bad. So this game means a lot. It means a lot, certainly more for the Colts to try and keep their season afloat. For Tennessee, it means to try to stay within Houston for the division lead. So this is a huge 1 o'clock tilt. I think there's a lot of players in this matchup really that you can use in this game and play. I think really I don't really see a whole lot of sits, at least in terms of players that you normally would utilize. I think a lot of players here you can use. For the Colts, the obvious, Andrew Luck, you keep rolling with him. Still going to get plenty of work. Yes, the Tennessee defense has improved somewhat this year. They are a tougher defense, but I think they can still be exploited in a lot of ways. And the Colts, I think, are going to have to throw to keep up because Tennessee is going to probably put up points at will because of the running back and Mariota making plays. So they're going to have to throw. Andrew Luck's still going to have a good fantasy day. Now, T.Y. Hilton, the receiving core for the Colts, is a little bit of a question mark because, again, of injury. Dante Moncrief still is going to be probably about a week or two out with that shoulder issue, so he's not quite recovered yet. He hasn't practiced all this week. So, I have Dante Moncrief stashed on my bench right now. So, once he gets healthy, he's going to be a great option, I think, for us. But for now, keep him on your benches, keep him stashed. And Philip Dorsett, really to me he's not emerged as a really, reliable threat since Moncrief's been out. So that's a big question mark. And T.Y. Hilton, as long as he plays, you play T.Y. Hilton. He is listed as questionable with a little bit of a hip issue. But as long as he goes, you play T.Y. Hilton because he's going to get a lot of targets. For the Titans' obvious starts, it's DeMarco Murray and Delanie Walker. I mean, those two are surefire guys at running back and tight end. Must-start guys for you every single week. They're going to keep putting up big numbers, especially because we know the Colts defense isn't exactly elite. It's more like Swiss cheese than a steel wall. So, DeMarco Murray is going to have a good week, and same thing I think for Delanie Walker as well. But I think you can start, again, a lot of other players in this matchup, and I got one here at each of the positions as well. Marcus Mariota, you certainly can start him in this matchup. This is a great matchup against a defense that, like I said, Swiss cheese, tissue paper. I mean, you can make the comparison. Towel in the wind. You can make the banner the players run through at the games. The ones that tear easily. That's the Colts defense right now. It's not exactly a great unit. So I think another good bye week filler option, or certainly a streamer with high-end quarterback 2 upside. Frank Gore, I mean, Frank Gore continues to get the bulk of the work. He's got no challenges in this offense. And last week he had a 100-yard game. He had 106 yards on the ground. That was his first 100-yard game since a couple years ago for San Francisco, and the first 100-yard game for the Colts in 4 years since Vic Ballard. Remember Vic Ballard? Vic Ballard in Week 15 of the 2012 season. So it was huge for Gore to hit that mark. Yes, the Titans defense is tough, but he's going to get the bulk of the work, and I think he'll get enough, really. He might not have a big fantasy day considering the tough matchup. He probably won't hit 100 yards again, but I think he'll still put out enough to at least, 6 to 8 fantasy points, a solid RB2 day. Whether end zone, that's always up for debate because you've got Turbin there and Ferguson potentially to vulture touchdowns. But, I think he'll still have a decent enough fantasy day. Kendall Wright at wide receiver. Like, wait a minute, you're saying, wait a minute, what happened to Tajay Sharp? Well, Tajay Sharp, hi, I'm the rookie Wall. Oh, hi, Tajay Sharp. Tajay Sharp has clearly run smack dab into the rookie wall, and he's clearly fallen off the map. But now Kendall Wright had a big week last week. Now that he's fully healthy again, he emerged as a big option last week. So I think he's going to have at least some wide receiver 3 value. If you're desperate at wide receiver, if you're hurting, I think he's at least worth a look as a flyer, maybe even as a flex play if you can use a wide receiver as a flex in your league or a PPR league. I think Kendall Wright is actually a really, really good play this week, considering, again, the Colts secondary, not elite, banged up, and I think, he can be used this week as well. And Jack Doyle. Jack Doyle, the Colts tight end, Dwayne Allen is hurt. Wow, what a shocker. Here's my shocked face. He's hurt with the ankle issue. So now Doyle's value significantly rises. And even though Dwayne Allen was healthy, Doyle was still getting a lot of targets. And no surprise, he was scoring more touchdowns than Dwayne Allen because Dwayne Allen, as I've said on here, is not a touchdown-scoring tight end. But, now becomes a low-end tight end 1 because of this usage in the offense. So, excuse me. So I really like Jack Doyle in this matchup this week. I can spit it out this time, unless it goes down the wrong pipe. So really the only guy of any value I think you really need to sit in this matchup is Philip Dorsett. I just don't like what I've seen in him. Really, to me, he's looking more and more like a first-round draft pick bust in terms of the NFL draft, because that's where the Colts drafted him, first round. And it's like, don't bother. Plus, he's also banged up himself. He's also questionable with a hamstring issue, and that's never good for a receiver anyway. So I don't like what I see there. I don't think you can trust Philip Dorsett this week. But a lot of guys in that matchup you certainly can trust. Vikings at the Eagles, also known as the Bradford Bowl. Sam Bradford gets to face his former team for the first time. And you know what? I know a lot of people have said the Minnesota Vikings, and I've said it also, they're 5-0 because mainly of their defense. And that might be true. But again, I cannot say enough the job that Sam Bradford has done now in 4 weeks as the starting quarterback. The job that he has done has been nothing short of amazing. Learning the playbook that fast, getting in there, and just willing this team to victories has just been absolutely outstanding. And now he faces the team that decided to let him go and play the rookie Carson Wentz over him. So, and personally, when I first saw it, I thought it was a win-win for both sides. And maybe at the end of the day, it might still be. But Carson Wentz now, hi, rookie Wall. Hi, Carson Wentz. The last few weeks, Carson Wentz has hit the rookie wall, and he's not looked very good as his first 4 weeks of the season. So that's probably going to be the big storyline in this matchup. But I also feel this game, is going to be a fantasy letdown because I feel like this is going to be a very defensive-minded struggle game. I don't really see a high-scoring game here. We know how good the Vikings defense already is. That's a given. But the Eagles' defense certainly is nothing to mess around with either. I don't think there will be very many opportunities for the Vikings guys to make big plays. So there's only really a couple guys this week that I like in this matchup. In fact, there's only 3. Stephon Diggs. It looks like this is the week he's going to come back for the Vikings at wide receiver, their top receiving option. He is still listed as questionable with that hamstring issue, so you want to monitor that, especially tomorrow on the injury report and then going into Sunday when they post the inactives. But it looks like this is the week that Stephon Diggs comes back, so that'd be a huge thing for Sam Bradford to have that top option back. So I think as long as he's active, you play Stephon Diggs. If you don't, I don't think any other receiving options are good. Maybe you play Adam Thielen as a what-the-heck 3. But other than that, I don't like, Laquan Treadwell. He's still a rookie. He hasn't gotten involved yet. So I don't think you play him. Jordan Matthews, I still think Jordan Matthews is a good start. Now, even though, again, those corners for Minnesota will be on him, Xavier Rhodes will probably be on Jordan Matthews. But I think he's still at least got high-end wide receiver 2 value. He probably won't put up, again, big stats this week. But certainly I think he'll put up enough to have a decent fantasy day. So I think you can still play Jordan Matthews. And Kyle Rudolph at tight end. Again, another great security blanket there for Sam Bradford. He's been a great target in the offense. You keep going with him as well as your tight end 1. Everyone else, though, I don't like in this matchup. Again, Sam Bradford going up against the Eagles. Really? You're really going to want to play Sam Bradford against his former team? You crazy. You honestly crazy. It's like that Hey Arnold skit. Don't hit me. I'll hit me. You crazy. You crazy, man. You crazy. The Eagles are going to try to want to do everything they can to keep Sam Bradford in check. You know that. So I don't recommend him as a great play this week. And same with Carson Wentz. Again, rookie meet wall. It's just, and the wall usually defeats the rookie every single time when that happens. That 4-week run, it was nice. It was nice to see Carson Wentz looking really good. But these last 2 weeks just been brutal for Carson Wentz, and it's time for some degree of reality. He really, at this point, he should be left on waivers. He can't be owned at this point. Maybe you scout him, but he can't be owned at this point. Not now, not in this tough stretch of matchups at this point. Jerick McKinnon, the Vikings running back, I don't really like him in this matchup. The Eagles' front 4 is quite strong, and there's always that chance that McKinnon gets vultured for a touchdown by Matt Asiata. So I don't like that there. For me, I can only rate McKinnon as a high-end RB3 or a flex play. And the Eagles running backs, Ryan Matthews, Darren Sproles, maybe Wendell Smallwood, I don't like him against that Vikings front 4. I don't think you can trust any of those guys in this matchup. I don't like this game really for fantasy purposes outside of the 3 guys I mentioned, Diggs, Matthews, and Rudolph. Browns at Bengals. This one's pretty simple. Start your Bengals and sit your Browns. I mean, that's pretty much – I don't really like to go into big detail about this game. Maybe except, again, the only Brown really that you really can trust is Isaiah Crowell at running back. He's really the only one that's been trustworthy. But outside of that, it's not pretty. The Browns are still the only winless team in the NFL, 0-6. Terrell Pryor's still hurting with the hamstring issue. And the other guys are just not very reliable with Cody Kessler under center. So your Bengals, you're starting Giovanni Bernard. That's a given at running back. You're starting A.J. Green at wide receiver. He's probably going to have a heck of a day. You're starting Andy Dalton this week. I think great, again, a great bye-week filler option this week, and I think a great play in 2 quarterback leagues certainly has low-end QB1 upside. Jeremy Hill. And we've been down on Jeremy Hill the last few weeks because I've always praised Bernard and how he's been a better running back being that dual threat. But I think he should be able to get enough production this week against this really very weak defense to shine in this matchup. So, if you had to choose, I still like Gio Bernard as the better play. But I think Hill certainly has enough high-end RB2 value this week to be startable and be usable in this matchup. And Tyler Eifert. It looks like this is finally the week that the Bengals get Tyler Eifert back at tight end. Now, if you'll forget, and I'm sure we have, considering we're 7 weeks into the season, last season all Tyler Eifert did at tight end was be the best freaking tight end in the NFL in terms of scoring touchdowns. It wasn't Gronk, folks. It was Tyler Eifert. He led the league with 15 touchdowns last season and was the MVP of our fantasy team for sure, because I had Eifert last year, and oh boy, it was fun seeing him score touchdowns almost every single week. So, it's been a long time coming for him. If he quickly gets back into game flow, certainly he's that tight end one. If you've had him, you've been sitting on him and think, okay, this is the week. I think now you can put him back in there. So you definitely want to start Tyler Eifert if he is full go this week. And it's looking more like that will be the case. But you sit the rest of your Browns. You don't rely on Cody Kessler. Terrell Pryor is likely out with that hamstring bothering him again. And Gary Barnidge, still really didn't have much fantasy value at all with Kessler under center, just not being utilized as often as we would say at Josh McCown. I don't like that going forward. So for the most part, outside of Isaiah Crowell, you're sitting your Browns. You're playing pretty much all the Bengals you use, really. Yeah, you rely on it on a weekly basis. So you go with that. Not much to say about that one. My offensive game of the week, though, this week might surprise you, but then again, it might not. I'm talking Washington at the Lions. What can we say about Washington the past 4 weeks? They've been a completely different team since the start of the year after that 0-2 start. And we were talking about Kirk Cousins potentially losing his starting job to Colt McCoy, and that he was losing the locker room and losing leadership. And now all of a sudden, these last 4 weeks, Washington looks like a completely different team over these last 4 weeks. I mean, especially in the passing game, Kirk Cousins looks like, again, very much a viable quarterback, and he's utilizing the weapons that he has there in the passing game with Deshaun Jackson and Jamison Crowder, who's actually emerging as a very good touchdown threat, I might add. And they might get Jordan Reed back this week at tight end. So all things right now are clicking for Washington. I'm still a little weary about the run game. I'm not sold on Matt Jones just yet. He hadn't really looked good the past a couple weeks, so I'm really leery about that. But outside of that, the passing game and the defense has looked strong. Ryan Kerrigan came back last week, and oh my gosh, had 3 sacks against Carson Wentz, and so he has looked very well these past few weeks. So very impressed there. But now going up against Detroit, and Detroit does tend to play better at home, but boy, Detroit's defense gives up a lot. But that's where their offense has to throw the football to keep up. And oh, by the way, also, Detroit's running back situation is not exactly good right now because Amir Abdullah is on injured reserve. Theo Riddick is banged up, and he might not play, which means DeAndre Washington, again, could be the lead back there. And then Zach Zenner getting involved, and Justin Forsett, who they picked off of Baltimore. Oh, what a nightmare. What a mess. There's certainly some not to like in this matchup, but there's a lot to like in this matchup. I think this is going to be a very high-scoring game because both teams can really put up points, number one, but number two, their defenses aren't exactly strong outside of the front four of Washington. So your obvious plays for the Lions, it's the top two. It's Matthew Stafford at quarterback and Marvin Jones at wide receiver. Those two have become no-brainer guys for you on a weekly basis. You keep going with those two guys here. And for Washington, I just talked about the two weapons. Now, both of them right now are listed as questionable. Deshaun Jackson at wide receiver is listed as questionable with a shoulder issue. He's kind of been nagging him in practice a bit. But I think all signs are now to him pointing to him at least playing for now. So as long as he plays, you keep putting him out there as well. And I mentioned Jordan Reed at tight end. He is still listed as questionable right now with the concussion. Going through the concussion protocol, but as long as he's cleared this week, it'd be a big boost to get Jordan Reed back. And even though Vernon Davis did actually have a touchdown last week, I'm not really sold on him being a worthwhile fantasy asset going forward. But as long as Jordan Reed's active, you put him out there. Maybe you throw in Davis as a what the heck too if Jordan Reed is out. But I think as long as Jordan Reed's active, you play Jordan Reed. And again, I mentioned Kirk Cousins and Jamison Crowder. I think these are two guys that you can start this week with confidence. And everyone's forgotten now that everyone's talking about Cousins being benched. Well, no more. I mean, Kirk Cousins has definitely put his stamp on this offense, and the Lions secondary can be thrown upon. So I think Cousins is really a nice high-end QB2 this week. I think certainly he's usable, and I think he's going to have a really good game. A little bit late on that because my opponent has Kirk Cousins and is now starting him because he lost Roethlisberger, so that worries me a little bit. But I think he's going to have a decent fantasy week this week. And again, Jamison Crowder, he's getting more involved in the offense. He's starting to find the end zone on a weekly basis. Had a touchdown against Philly last week, so he's clearly become really, excuse me, a favorite target of Cousins. So now certainly has high-end wide receiver 3 fantasy value. And I never thought I'd mention this guy as a start, but oh my gosh, we now know that Golden Tate's on the Lions. Oh my gosh, it finally happened. Golden Tate had a breakout fantasy game last week. He had a huge week, over 150 receiving yards. And you really hope if you've been a Golden Tate owner, if you held on to him, if you stashed him on your bench, holding out hope, thinking at some point the Lions have to know that Golden Tate is on their roster. At some point they have to know. You hope that big week is a sign of things to come. I mean, for the first 6 weeks of the season was practically invisible. Where's Golden? Where's Golden Tate? We can't find him. We can't find him. We can't even see him. And then week 7, here I am, here he is. Oh, hi. What was I doing for 6 weeks? I was kind of, just out there, blocking, saying hi to the cheerleaders, and, gave guys high fives, and, slap hands, now that was Golden Tate the first 6 weeks. He was nowhere, but for now, so because of that big week, I think you have to rate Tate at least as a wide receiver 3 with some upside, and hope that trend continues. You hope it's not a blip on the radar and that it can continue moving forward. As for the sits, again, I mentioned Matt Jones. I'm just not sold on him, or Washington's running game in general. I'm not sold on that. The passing offense really is carrying the flag for the team right now. So for me, Jones is more of a risky running back 3 at RB3 at best. Chris Thompson more of a 4 or a flex. I just don't really see. Same with Rob Kelly, who they used last week a little bit in the offense, more of a 4 RB4. The Lions running backs, again, I mentioned, they're just not worth using at this point because, again, you don't know who's going to get the bulk of the work. It's a committee headache, and you don't want to mess with that in fantasy. Pierre Garçon just doesn't get enough targets. He's really not fantasy relevant at this point, so I wouldn't use him. And Eric Ebron, the Lions tight end, this could be the week that he comes back. He has practiced a little bit this week with the knee issue, but I really wouldn't I'm not ready to put him in lineups just yet until he goes back to being full go. You want to monitor the injury reports, monitor the practice reports this week if you're an Eric Ebron owner. You see whether or not he's full go or not. If he plays, maybe again a low end tight end 1 or 2, but just see what happens with him before you put him in your lineup if he's active this week. Raiders at the Jags. This could be a fairly entertaining game again because this is normally 2 really not so great defenses. The Raiders' passing defense is among one of the worst in the NFL, and the Jags, while they have made some improvement over the years with their defense, they can still give up a lot of points. So this game could actually be again one of those shootout games that kind of comes right down to the end. So that's why I like a lot of guys in this matchup. There's not really a whole lot of players here that I don't like for this game. The obvious guy is Derek Carr for the Raiders. I'm starting Derek Carr in my league this week, even though I picked up Jameis Winston off waivers, who also has a good matchup this week, I might add, against San Francisco. I still like Derek Carr's matchup this week against Jacksonville. I still like it, so I'm going to go with Derek Carr. Latavius Murray, his status is still in doubt, the running back. If he plays, he's still dealing with that toe issue. He's still listed as day-to-day, but again, we're all day-to-day. But, if he goes, you put him in there as at least an RB2. If he's not active, though, I don't like Jalen Richard or DeAndre Washington. I think that's kind of a mix there with the committee. They're really nothing more than RB3 or flex plays if Murray's out. But if you had to pick one, I'd play Jalen Richard because he's going to get the bulk of the work. Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree, those guys, are obvious starts as well. The top receiving options there for the Raiders. You keep rolling out those guys every single week as well. For the Jags, really the only obvious two are their two big receiving weapons, and that's Allen Robinson, a wide receiver. You know what you're going to get from him. A lot of the targets and does a lot with them every single week. So you keep going with Allen Robinson. And Julius Thomas at tight end, it looks like he's going to be active. He has dealt with some injury issues over the course of the season, but it looks like he is going to play this week. And you put him out there at least as a low-end tight end one. And the other two guys you can start, I think, for the Jaguars, Blake Bortles, and he's kind of had a very rough year, in the quarterback position. And it's just been tough. But here's the thing: if Bortles cannot take advantage of this matchup against one of the league's worst pass defenses, I think it's officially panic time in Jacksonville. I think you've got to really start wondering, is he starting to regress? Because the talent's there, the opportunity's there, and again, if they get down big in this game, garbage time. We know the Jaguars are the kings of garbage time, so. He's got to be able to take advantage of this matchup. He just has to keep rolling with them as a high-end QB2 at least, and really hope for the best if you want to play Blake Bortles this week. And I'm going to say TJ Yeldon. Look, at running back, let's not just give up on Yeldon just yet. At first we thought at the start of the year Chris Ivory was getting the start and he'll like the better back, but then injuries took its toll on him. He's been dealing with an illness. He's been dealing with different things. And then Yeldon's actually looked pretty good in his play. So let's not give up on him just yet. He really needs, again, to take advantage against this defense. I think he's certainly got high-end RB2 appeal with definite upside. So I like TJ Yeldon. Guys to sit again, I mentioned Richard and Washington. Sit them this week. And Allen Hurns, the Jaguars' number 2 wide receiver. He's been limited at practice this week with a shoulder issue. If he does play, though, more of a low-end wide receiver 2, but the thing of it is, his targets, is he going to get work? You got to remember also Marquise Lee, more wide receiver 4, but he's starting to get more targets as well. So just keep that in mind. But for me, Hurns, very, very risky play with that issue. But as long as he goes, at least a wide receiver 2, just keep that in mind and keep the eye on the injury reports for Allen Hurns. All right, a lot of storylines with this one. Bills at the Dolphins. And apparently, maybe calling them the Dolphins, I guess, woke them up from a coma last week because somehow, and I don't know how, somehow they beat Pittsburgh. I don't know how they did it. I thought that game was going to be, in fact, I'm pretty sure I called it the blowout of the week. I'm pretty sure I did. I'm sure you can rewind the tape on the last video and look back and see, oh, yeah, Chris called it the blowout of the week. And because I thought it was going to be, because Miami was an absolute mess. But somehow they pulled it out. Now, granted, Big Ben was banged up most of that game, so maybe they took advantage of that. But then I had another thought. I'm thinking, well, wait, Carson Wentz also made the Steelers defense look like fools, and he was a rookie. So, take that what you will. But, is 1 week going to save the Dolphins season? I don't know. I really don't know. We'll see. But Buffalo is going to be a much, much tougher test for the Dolphins this week. And of course, there's not only that, there's big news coming out of Buffalo. As I mentioned in the open, no LaShawn McCoy. He will not play this week. He could miss multiple weeks, according to Anderson. So that means Mike Gillislee now steps up and becomes an immediate RB1. If you need help at running back, if you don't have running back depth, if you have a running back on your bench that you don't even use, if you have a running back that's on bye this week and you don't trust, if you just have, if you're just needing help at that position, I know you can't pause this video because we're live streaming, but open up a new window right now. Open up a new tab. Open up a new window. Okay. Go to your league page. Okay. You're there? Okay. Go to your league page. Okay. Okay. Go to your waivers. Okay. We'll look right in. We'll make sure first look right in the waiver order. Make sure you're up to the top of the waiver order. Okay. Make sure there's no other potential claims in there. Okay. Okay. Go up there. Okay. Type in this name. Type in Mike Gillislee. That's Gillislee. Gillislee. Okay. Type that in. Okay, got it? Okay. And click on the little button that says, is there a plus button or an add button right there? Okay, there is. Good. Okay, hit that add button. Okay, add him to your team right now. Don't let another one get him. Don't let another guy get him right now. Add him. Okay, drop the player that's really not producing for you, or that you are confident in dropping, at least the most confident in dropping, that's not going to help you long term. Okay, do that. Okay, and then hit the submit button and feel good about yourself, okay? Because Buffalo has one of the best offensive lines in football, and oh, by the way, they lead the league in rushing. And Miami is like third worst against the run. So this is a prime matchup for Gillislee to shine in. And really, Buffalo's schedule going forward is very forgiving when it comes to run defenses. They, over the next like 5 or 6 weeks, Buffalo plays some of the worst run defenses in the NFL. So this is a great outlook for Buffalo going forward. If McCoy is out for an extended period of time, Gillislee is going to benefit immensely. So this is a no-brainer move if you are in need of a running back that you want to put in at least for a few weeks and maybe even longer. Granted, turning on McCoy's status, Gillislee, you put him in right now and reap the rewards. Also, the other obvious starts, Tyrod Taylor, the quarterback for the Bills. We know how dynamic he's been. We know how good he's been this season. You keep going with him. And Jarvis Landry, wide receiver for the Dolphins. Only though, I think in PPR leagues, you see a really good play. Maybe more wide receiver 3 in standard leagues. Same with Devontae Parker. But really, they're just not getting really a lot of work to be really highly relevant, but certainly enough to have some fantasy value. And let's talk about Jay Ajayi, the running back. We need to talk about him because, my gosh, he had an absolute huge week last week. He put up over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Steelers. He also had 32 fantasy points last week. So is this the sign of a one-hit wonder or a long-term thing with Jay Ajayi? It's very hard to tell. Arian Foster, the very injured Arian Foster, he might have just lost his job. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure he might have lost his job to Jay Ajayi. So, as certainly, again, if you need help at running back and Jay Ajayi is by the off chance available in your league, again, hit your tab again and go up there and get Jay Ajayi, because I think certainly he at least has RB2 appeal moving forward, because we know it looks like he's going to get the bulk of the work. Because I don't think, even though Arian Foster's a great back, he's only great when he's healthy. And every year it happens. Something happens to Arian Foster, and his backup pays dividends. So, it happened with Alfred Blue in Houston. It's now happening here with Jay Ajayi in Miami. So, I think it also happened with Steve Slayton in Houston when Foster was hurt. So, I think Jay Ajayi is going to very much benefit from this, and I think he at least has RB2 appeal. The other sits in this game, really, they're the only other 2 guys on the Dolphins. That's Ryan Tannehill. Look, I don't think lightning in a bottle here is going to strike twice. Rex Ryan doesn't really fall asleep at the wheel very often. He's going to have a game plan now to shut down Tannehill, and that the pass rush is going to be on him. I think is a very risky QB3 play for me this week. And again, I mentioned Devontae Parker, risky wide receiver 3 or flex play at best, very much a boomer bust. And Robert Woods of Buffalo, yes, he is the Bills' default number 1 because Sammy Watkins is on IR, but really he hasn't done a whole lot with it. And plus, he's also dealing with a foot issue, so his status on Sunday is very much in doubt. So he might even want to play him anyway because of that. If he does go, he's very much just a risky wide receiver 4. If he's out, though, Marquise Goodwin is then someone who could benefit because he then becomes the next in line as the number 1, and then maybe he has high-end wide receiver 4 value or low-end wide receiver 3 value as a result. Because at least what Robert Woods lacks, Marquise Goodwin has speed. I mean, he has breakneck speed. He burned somebody for a touchdown. I forget who it was earlier this year. It might have been the Jets, but he just he has that breakneck speed that I think Robert Woods lacks. So. If Woods doesn't play, then I think Goodwin is someone who could be a flyer wide receiver 4 play for you this week as well. But yeah, the big story, McCoy, out with that hamstring. I had to tack it on literally at the end of my notes because it happened so late in the day that I had to put it on there late. So, and then I had to make the move. So, what more can you say? Now it's time for the game of the week. WEAK, again, the rotten game here. Ravens at Jets. I don't like a whole lot in this game. I think it's going to be, again, a very low-scoring, ugly game. For the Jets, the big story, of course, is the quarterback change. I think somewhere Mob Guy is devastated because Ryan Fitzpatrick just lost a starting job to Geno Smith. So now we're going to see what Geno has going forward. So that obviously isn't good, and especially considering going up against a very good Ravens defense, but who is also banged up a little bit in terms of the receiving core. And there's also a concern at quarterback. Joe Flacco is dealing with a shoulder issue, and his status for this week is very much in question. But we did get a report. Actually, I saw on NFL Network actually a little bit ago that the signs, though, are encouraging that Flacco is going to play this week. So we were all maybe thinking, oh, great. It's going to be Ryan Mallett against Geno Smith. That might not be the case anymore. At least the Ravens could end up having Flacco after all. So that'd be huge from a Baltimore perspective. Not good if you're a Jets fan, but we'll see. Monitor it. Monitor those injury reports. Look at them throughout the week, and especially tomorrow's practice report for Baltimore, and see what happens with Joe Flacco. But your obvious. I think Bilal Powell for the Jets, the running back. I think he could be used definitely as a play in PPR leagues or as a flex play because again, he's starting to eat into Matt Forte's workload. He's starting to eat into his touches. Also, Forte's been dealing with that knee issue, and I don't think he looks the same. So Bilal Powell, this is quickly becoming a timeshare in the Jets' backfield, and Bilal Powell certainly could be usable as at least an RB3 in standard leagues, but definitely usable as a PPR or flex play in those leagues as well. So I love what I see from him right now. And again, he's kind of got that speed I think that Forte lacks. Also for the Jets, you start Brandon Marshall. Even though Geno Smith's a quarterback, Brandon Marshall has thrived under any quarterback usually that he's been with. For gosh sakes, he was struggling in Chicago for years with Jay Cutler and Josh McCown. And no matter who it was, Brandon Marshall thrived. So I think he's kind of like quarterback proof. He benefits whoever is under center. So I think you go with him. The only Raven I think you can really trust is Terrence West at running back. Kenneth Dixon looks like he's far from being an explosive back at this point. So I think Terrence West is going to be the guy going forward. So I think you keep rolling him out in matchups at least as an RB2. But I think Mike Wallace, is also a good start this week. Again, Steve Smith likely won't play this week because of the ankle issue. So Mike Wallace would be, again, the Jets secondary is putrid. They're absolutely terrible. Darrelle Revis is not the same anymore. He's been getting burned, and then Buster Screen, who is always known to get burned on plays. I think Wallace should be seen really as a nice bye-week filler this week. So you don't have a Kelvin Benjamin or you don't have, Beasley. Then with low-end, I think low-end wide receiver 2 value. As long as Flacco plays, I think you can use Mike Wallace. Now, if Mallett goes, that kind of drops his value. I think maybe a tier down to a wide receiver 3. But certainly if Flacco is active, I think Mike Wallace is going to have a really good fantasy day. But for the rest of the guys, I think these guys are sits. You don't play Geno Smith yet. It's his first game of the year. You don't play him yet. If Ryan Mallett is active, you don't play him. As long as Joe Flacco is active, you play Joe Flacco. But if he's out, you don't trust Ryan Mallett in your fantasy this week, even though the matchup is good. It's Ryan Mallett, and we don't know what to expect, so you don't trust him. Again, I mentioned Matt Forte. Something just does not look right with him. It may be the knee. It may be that Powell's taking more touches from him. Either way, I just can't rate him as anything higher than a low-end RB2. I don't really see that explosiveness right now that we saw earlier in the year from Matt Forte. And I remember saying at the beginning of the year, Matt Forte is beastly. He's awesome. He's this, he's that, and was looking really good. And all of a sudden, he's kind of fallen back to earth. So too much risk and not enough reward with Matt Forte. Quincy Enunwa, just hasn't worked out. He really hasn't emerged in Eric Decker's absence as the number 2 receiver. He's not really even a wide receiver 3 at this point. Shouldn't be owned. And Dennis Pitta, the Ravens tight end, he just can't be trusted right now due to the lack of targets. I just don't think he can be used at this point. He's really fallen out of favor these last few weeks. All right, the afternoon games. Bucks at the Niners, 4:05 tilt. I think a big week for the Bucks this week. Obviously, again, the Niners defense we saw last week did not look very good against Buffalo. Buffalo torched them for like 44 points and buku stat days from McCoy and Taylor, and even Gillislee had a touchdown in that game against San Francisco when McCoy got hurt. So I think it's going to be big numbers for the Bucks this week. If you have Buccaneers on your roster, you're playing these guys. If you don't have better options, Mike Evans is your obvious must start. He's the obvious guy you put in there anytime. But Jameis Winston, we've all seen that 49ers defense. It's nothing special. And Winston, I think, is really – I picked up Jameis Winston off the waiver wire in my league this week as my number 2 guy behind Derek Carr. And they're really close in terms of projection. They're very, very similar in terms of how many points they're going to score. So it was a tough call for me. But I like Carr's matchups a little bit better because it's Jacksonville. So, but Winston's another nice, bye week streamer option. Serious, I think, low-end QB1 upside in this good matchup this week. I think he's going to have to throw a lot, and he's going to utilize those weapons and make big plays. Jacquizz Rodgers, the Buccaneers running back. Doug Martin, I mentioned, had that setback this week in practice with the hamstring, so he's still going to be out a long period of time. And Rodgers, and again, Charles Sims is on IR, so Rodgers is going to be the lead man in this backfield. So I think Rodgers has nice high-end RB2 upside in this plus matchup. And Cameron Brate, I picked up Cameron Brate off waivers at tight end and replaced Zach Ertz, who wasn't doing much with Wentz in Philadelphia. So I got Cameron Brate. He's going to benefit because Vincent Jackson is out with a knee issue and going to be out for, it looks like, a long period of time. But Vincent Jackson is always banged up somewhere. So I think Cameron Brate's going to benefit. And I think certainly he's a high-end tight end too, but certainly tight end 1 upside because he's gotten a lot of targets in this offense. But for the rest of the guys, especially the 49ers, these guys are sits. Kaepernick, I know it's only been 1 week, but I'm not encouraged with what I see. But with Carlos Hyde being out, I think his value increases a bit because that'll lead to more running ability for Kaepernick. So more of a desperate low-end QB2 at best. Hyde is likely out with that shoulder injury that's bothering him. That means that Mike Davis will come in and replace him, but he's only an RB3 or a flex play at best. Torrey Smith, even though Cap did use Torrey Smith a lot more than Jeremy Curley, I don't trust him for fantasy purposes. He's not really even a wide receiver 3. Same with Curley, though. But speaking of Curley, without Blaine Gabbert at quarterback, he's disappeared. I think Curley can be left on waivers at this point. And then really the only buck I worry about is Adam Humphries. Now, a lot have said that also Adam Humphries would benefit because Vincent Jackson was out. Well, the coaches come out and said really that, Dirk Cutter's come out and said that his role really isn't going to change with Vincent Jackson out. So, therefore, because of that, he's really just more of a flyer wide receiver 3 or 4. If his targets aren't going to increase, that doesn't change his fantasy value. So, I worry about that as well. Chargers Falcons. This is offensive game of the week number 2. I mean, I think this game is going to be a big time shootout. I think this is going to be. I think a lot of guys in this matchup are going to be really, really good plays this week. Both these teams, can score a lot of points. Number 1 and number 2, their defenses also tend to give up a lot, so that usually leads to putting up big numbers. So this is going to be a fun game to watch at 4:05 in the afternoon on Sunday. So your obvious guys for the Falcons, it's your main guys, Matt Ryan, Devontae at quarterback, Devontae Freeman at running back, Julio Jones at wide receiver. Your main 3 guys that have been the key cogs for the Falcons all season long. You keep rolling out these guys in fantasy, they're going to put up big numbers. For the Chargers, kind of the same thing. Their big 3. Phillip Rivers at quarterback. Yes, you keep rolling with him. Melvin Gordon, their do-all running back. Yes, you keep going with him. And their number 3 now is their tight end. But no, it's not who you think. It's not Antonio Gates. It's Hunter Henry, the rookie out of Arkansas, has emerged as the top tight end weapon, and I think he's looking like a strong tight end one for the rest of the season because he's getting those targets, he's doing things with them, and oh, by the way, he's finding the end zone, so which is always big, especially at a position as thin as tight end. So certainly, I think Hunter Henry is usable this week in this matchup, and certainly I think even going forward. But I'm also going to say you can start both of the other Charger wide receivers this week. I'm talking about Travis Benjamin and Tyrell Williams. I think both are really good plays this week. Wide receiver 2 or 3 plays this week against a very forgiving Falcons defense and secondary. I think both guys will have good fantasy days. One will probably find the end zone. The other probably won't. But I think in the end, they're both going to have good days. And I'm going to say Mohamed Sanu with the Falcons. He's back healthy, emerging as that number 2 wide receiver for Atlanta behind Julio Jones. So I think certainly there's wide receiver 3 value there with Mohamed Sanu. As for the sits, though, Tevin Coleman, and I'm sure a lot of owners out there would say, why would you sit Tevin Coleman? He's been just as productive with Freeman. It's a clear timeshare. Well, be that as it may be, I hate players that go through this fantasy roller coaster. And the last 4 games have been a fantasy roller coaster. 26 points, then 2, then 22, then 1. Would you really want a player of that headache on your lineup or on your roster? I wouldn't. I ditched Tevin Coleman a long time ago because I knew what a headache he was going to be in that timeshare with Devontae Freeman. So I can't trust him. For me, he's just rated nothing more than an RB3 or a flex. Devontae Freeman's going to get the load of the work, and he's going to make it pay off. So I just don't like Tevin Coleman here. And Antonio Gates, again, I mentioned, the old man has clearly lost his job. He's lost his job to the rook Hunter Henry, and he doesn't get the targets that he used to. So I don't think you can trust Antonio Gates at this point. All right. Next up, Patriots at Steelers. Now on paper, seems like a really good matchup. 5-1 Patriots at the 4-2 Steelers. Really good. But again, the big story, no Big Ben. Roethlisberger's out 2 to 6 weeks with that torn meniscus. So now the offense turns over in the hands of Landry Jones. And, Landry Jones is not exactly a great quarterback by any stretch. So obviously you have to downgrade all of the Steelers' skill players, their top options. But really, I think the guys really you can still play are Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. I think those two are still going to have, obviously Le'Veon Bell benefits because, he's the running back. You don't really get the ball thrown to him much. So he's going to benefit greatly from this. But Brown, I think is still matchup proof. I think even though, and actually when Landry Jones was playing with Antonio Brown still had good games. So I think really Antonio Brown benefits from kind of that quarterback proof thing or matchup proof benefits either way. So I think you keep going with him. But really, outside of that, those are really the only Steelers you can trust in this matchup. The Patriots, though, you play, especially after seeing what the Dolphins did to them, after seeing what Philadelphia did to the Steelers defense. You start your Patriots in this matchup this week. You start Tom Brady, obviously. You start LeGarrette Blount, obviously. James White, I really like James White in this matchup as a strong play, as a PPR or a flex play, because he's starting to get a lot more involved in the offense. Julian Edelman, as long as he's active, you play him. He is questionable with a foot issue, but as long as he is active, you play Julian Edelman. And you play their tight ends, Rob Gronkowski and Martellus Bennett. Again, I said it right now, only 4 tight ends are looking like elite at this point. 2 of them are in New England with Gronk and Martellus Bennett. So you keep going with those guys as well. Everyone else is pretty much a sit, especially, again, you don't play Landry Jones. Not in this matchup, especially against Bill Belichick. Even though he's at home, you're not playing him in this matchup. And again, the other wide receivers for the Steelers, you just can't trust with Landry Jones under center. They're not, like Sammy Coates, Marcus Wheaton. You're not trusting these guys with Big Ben out. Eli Rogers, if he comes back from the foot, you're not trusting him either. And then really the other pitch wide receivers, Chris Hogan and Danny Amendola. I really can't trust either of these guys either, because they cancel each other out for the targets. They both, occasionally will get targets, but they kind of cancel each other out. So both are really just risky wide receiver 4 plays, in my opinion. Sunday night games, Seahawks at the Cardinals. This is a big NFC West game. Oh, hang on. Let me take this real quick. Yes. So this is the Sunday night game this week, a big NFC West showdown. Either way, are the Cardinals going to get back in the NFC West hunt? They need, if so, they need this win in the worst way, because Seattle, of course, is playing very well this year at 4-1. Cardinals sitting at 3-3, but Carson Palmer back healthy is huge. David Johnson coming off a big game last week as well in the big win over the Jets. So this is a big game Sunday night. It's always fun when these two get together. It's a real test because both, as we know, both these defenses are very strong. So whatever offense takes advantage of the other defense will probably end up winning this game. But as a result of that, there's only really a few guys that I like in this matchup because the defenses are so strong. I still like Russell Wilson of the Seahawks because, again, he makes plays with his legs. And even though he might not be able to get to throw the ball very much in this matchup because of that tough secondary in Arizona, I think he's still, valuable enough to at least have low 1, high 2 value. So I think you can still play Russell Wilson. And Jimmy Graham at tight end in the red zone, the Seahawks are looking to him again. So I think you can still play Jimmy Graham as well. For the Cardinals, again, you got to keep going with David Johnson at running back. KFC's Kentucky Buckets. Pick up a $20 fill-up for game day. KFC, it's finger licking good. Let me turn on my porch light real quick. There we go. Sorry, I probably should wrap it up here because that's my tenant texting me. So again, I mentioned David Johnson. Keep going with him. Larry Fitzgerald. You probably can't afford to sit Larry Fitzgerald this week because Richard Sherman's probably going to make the night easy on him. More of a high-end wide receiver too, due to this tough matchup. But I think you got to keep going with him. I'm still starting him in my league, so keep going with him. As for the sits, Carson Palmer, don't expect QB1 production against the Legion of Boom. He's very much a risky QB2 this week. Kristen Michael, the Seahawks running back, no thanks. Risky low-end RB2 for me. Doug Baldwin, the Seahawks top wide receiver, will be shut out by Patrick Peterson. It's a conversation. Oh, hi, Patrick Peterson. How's life? You're going to ride my butt on Sunday night. No, great. It was my fantasy value for the week. So not playing Doug Baldwin. And then the other Cardinal receivers, John Brown, Michael Floyd, very risky wide receiver 3-4 plays due to the tough matchup. And then the Monday night game, the Osweiler Bowl with the Texans and the Broncos. I still like a lot of the running backs and wide receivers in this game. I like Devontae Booker, the Broncos running back. It's a PPR and a flex play. I think he's starting to take more targets from C.J. Anderson, so be aware of that. I still like Lamar Miller at running back for the Texans as well. And I still like the Broncos receivers, Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. I think you can start Trevor Siemian in this game as long as he's healthy. High-end QB2 definitive upside. C.J. Anderson, you can start him. Don't panic on him yet. But still a low-end RB1. Sit. Brock Osweiler, more of a QB2. Hang on. Hey, good. I needed it. They gave me 2. Okay. 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 So you're sitting, I mentioned Osweiler. And then DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller. Hopkins is more of a 2, and Fuller more of a 3, plus he's coming off that hamstring injury. All right. That is it. Good luck this week in week 7. Go out there and get a win. And we will see you again next week for the week 8 preview of the Fantasy Football Stock Report for your league, your team, your game, your home. Good night and good luck.